Hello everyone, and welcome to the Pioneer Travel Award lecture. I've already been introduced, but today I'll be presenting to you the next generation of buildings wired for health and wellbeing. So just to introduce, I'll be talking to you about why designing for health and wellbeing is important in the built environment, how I became involved in the topic, the Well Building Standard, which is used to certify buildings against people that live or work in the building's health and well-being. Biophilic design, which is a particular topic of interest of mine. And then I'll be talking to you about my travel experience in Sweden and Canada, which involved 3 case studies. I've visited many buildings, and these are the 3 buildings that I enjoyed the most, and they have a number of really interesting, unique, sustainable building solutions that I want to share with you today before concluding my presentation. Okay, so why design for health and wellbeing? Why is this important? Why has this become a trend and an interesting topic? So we spend more than 90% of our time inside buildings on average today in the UK, and as engineers we have the opportunity to therefore influence more than 90% of people's time because we build the environment that they're spending all their time in. As well as this, there's a direct tie between chronic health problems and the built environment. So if I take an office building, for example, physical problems, chronic health problems that come with an office environment are things like arthritis and obesity, and they're on the rise. And there's also mental health problems like stress, anxiety, and depression, which are also all on the rise. So we as engineers should be thinking about these things and trying to design buildings that can prevent these chronic health problems from continuing to rise. Work-related stress costs the UK 6.5 billion a year, and that's actually a minimum statistic that was taken 3 years ago, so that's probably risen since then. So this is also an economic problem. There are companies like Google and Amazon that have been really successful by kind of jumping on board with this type of design early. So Google have centered their advertising campaigns for jobs around health and well-being, and they say that they've attracted the most talented workforce by doing so. So in Toronto, in Google's headquarters in Canada, they have things like climbing walls in their office, amazing trees, a library, all these amazing places that you can spend your time. And they've said that they have attracted a larger pool of people and can therefore, picking out of a larger pool, can attract a more talented workforce. Okay, so how did I become involved? I became involved because, well, I work for a company called WSP, which if you're an engineer, you've probably heard of. And I saw we had designed a building in Melbourne, which was well certified and designed for health and wellbeing, and that kind of sparked my interest. I did a bit of research into it and just found that the topic really combined my passions, which isn't just structural engineering, but architecture and sustainability. And then I heard about the Pioneer Travel Award and decided that I wanted to focus my research topic around this. And I thought it'd be something really interesting to travel with and research. Okay, so a brief overview of WELL certification. I can't go into the depths of all the key criteria today because that would take forever. But here's a brief overview. So the rating system, you've heard of BREEAM in the UK, that's what we mainly use, and in the US and Canada, they use something called LEED, and it's very similar to these. So it basically rates a building against 7 key criteria and gives the building a rating of silver, gold, or platinum. So platinum's the highest you can achieve. You can rate a building for core and shell or interior. So core and shell basically means you can well certify a building through design, construction, and then occupation of a building. Well interior means you can certify an existing building, you can refurbish it to be well certified. This rating system is based on intelligent scientific research and was founded in New York in America. Okay, so under the category Mind, which is probably the least engineering type category, the least stringent category of WELL certification, there's something called Biophilic design, and this is something I'm really interested in and believe strongly in, so I wanted to share it with you today. So biophilia is a love of all living things and an inherent need to be surrounded by nature. I believe just like we exercise every day, we should also be getting out and involving ourselves in nature through evolution. That's our natural habitat. We didn't always live in big concrete jungles. And without the correct city planning, I believe that cities actually alienate us from nature, and I don't think that's healthy. Not all cities do that. Some cities are very well planned, but those with not many city parks certainly do. In 2030, 60% of us will live in urban areas, large towns or cities. So making sure we integrate nature into the built environment, I think, is really important, and that's something that WELL certification is trying to achieve. Okay, so I will be running through the buildings that I visited. First, I'm going to be talking about Sweden and then Canada, just because that's the order in which I visited these countries. So Sweden is a very forward-thinking country, and I learned absolutely loads from the people in Sweden. They were fantastic. So whenever there's a new trend or a new topic of interest in the engineering realm, I find that Sweden take it up really quickly and tend to work it into engineering practices often quicker than the UK. They already have a number of buildings that are well certified or under construction, which I visited. When working in their office, I noticed they're really sociable people. So every office that I visited had something called fika at 10 a.m. and then another in the afternoon, which is basically when everyone in the office gets up, goes to the kitchen, socialises, has tea and cake, and it's just a really nice atmosphere. Another thing I liked about Sweden is they have large canteen spaces in all of their offices, which literally every single person in the office, whether you're a graduate engineer or director level, will go to the canteen at lunchtime, socialise, interact, and I think that's something in the UK we're missing out on. We don't design our buildings for that, especially in London where there's limited space. So I'll be talking to you about Project Epic, which is my favourite building I visited in Sweden. It's the pioneer project for Scansgo, who are probably the largest contractor in Sweden, and a very, very successful project. So there's a huge market for WELL certification out there, and this building, 80% of the office space within this building was let out 1 year of completion, which in Malmö is unheard of, so a really successful project financially. So I've already said this is in the heart of Malmö. It's right by the busy, bustling central station in Malmö. It's a 6-story tall office block, and when I was out there, it was under construction. It will now be complete if you ever are in Malmö and want to go and visit it. Okay, so it's essentially not very tall, but it's a really fat building. So it's 15,000 square metres on plan, which is huge. And the architect had a vision with this building. So the building's made up of 2 halves. One half is next to the busy, bustling central station, and the other half is next to the calm harbour. So what they wanted to do is have a big central atrium that kind of combines the 2 tempers of the building into one and creates a more calm atmosphere for those working there. And I really liked that idea. As well as this atrium houses sky bridges, which you can't see in this photo, but you can see this huge central staircase that goes up all 6 stories. So this is a building that promotes physical activity. People aren't going to be using the lift. Another interesting thing about this atrium is you can just about see it, but there's a tree pit down there. There's going to be several tree pits, and you're going to have full height trees in this office space, which is how they're going to incorporate biophilic design into the project. Okay, so it achieved the highest WELL rating you can, which is WELL Platinum, Core and Shell. And one thing I liked about Scansgo when I got to visit the company and talk to the people that worked there is they wanted to make sure this building was not just sustainable during design and construction, but also sustainable during operation of the building. So they used a lot of sustainable construction materials. All of their bricks on their facade were imported from Poland and were recycled bricks, reused from other buildings. As well as this, that you can't see in these pictures because they were taken when I was there, which is when it was under construction. But all of the interior will be wood, which is reused from old window frames. Cycling is a big thing in Malmö, so everyone cycles to work, and Skanska wanted to keep promoting this. The only reason they found, when they did kind of surveys, that people didn't want to cycle into work was because they were worried about bike security. So what Scansgo has done is every single desk will have a bike parking facility next to the desk, so people can literally wheel in their bikes and take them to their desk, which is really cool. And yeah, that's going to promote cycling in the workplace. Okay, Canada. Canada, like Sweden, has a number of buildings that are well certified. And also, I didn't just visit well certified buildings, I also visited buildings that were sustainable and use kind of new technologies and new solutions. And I'll be going through 2 of those with you today. So I mentioned LEED before. They don't really use BREEAM out there. They use a rating system called LEED, and a lot of buildings are now being designed to another one called Fitwel. These are sustainable building certifications, and a number of the key criteria you need to achieve for WELL certification overlaps with LEED and Fitwel, which makes it popular in Canada, essentially. It's also a country rich in natural resources, and there's plenty of space, which definitely helps when designing a well-certified building. Okay, so first I'll be talking to you about CBRE HQ. So CBRE HQ, they are a real estate company, a very wealthy company, and they were a very sustainability-focused company as well. They were the first company to achieve a zero carbon work plan in 2010, ahead of pretty much any other company in Canada. Their new headquarters are on the 11th and 12th floor in a 42-storey tower in downtown Toronto, and I visited it when it was complete. It achieved, again, platinum, but for WELL Interior this time, in 2016. So one thing I loved about this building is they threw money at technology. They used technology I'd never heard of before and found fascinating. They use circadian rhythm lighting throughout their offices. So the circadian rhythm is connected to how we react with the sun every day. So throughout the day, the sun's temperature changes, but also the way we see light changes. So in the morning and the evening, the sun produces a redder glow, and this red glow causes our brain to produce melatonin, which makes us feel calm, and in the evening helps us fall asleep. In the middle of the day, the sun's light produces a more blue, vibrant light, similar to if you're looking at a computer screen or an iPhone, and that causes your cognitive function to improve, and it makes you more productive, which is why people tend to be more productive when it's brighter outside in the middle of the day. Artificial light doesn't do this. It tends to be the bright blue light throughout the whole day, constantly making you feel like you need to be productive, which isn't healthy. So what they did is they are mimicking the natural sunlight in their office, essentially. As well as this, they've used MERV 13 filters throughout their office, and that keeps CO2 at a maximum of 80 parts per million, which is really low. So to put that into perspective, a typical residential building will have filters that have a MERV rating of between 5 and 8. So the higher the MERV rating, the better at keeping CO2 and filtering out everything. So a very healthy environment. Okay, so this is another thing I hadn't heard of or thought of, but again, very clever. In meeting rooms, you want your voice to be projected, you want to be able to be heard, whereas in an office environment, especially if it's open plan, you find it distracting if someone across the room is talking. You don't necessarily want to hear what they're saying. So what CBRE wanted was they put white noise in their open plan offices environment, and that fractures sound. So you'll be able to tell that the person across the room is talking, but you won't necessarily be able to hear what they're saying unless you're close to them. A few other things that they did. They made sure everyone was within 25 feet of a window, so for natural light. They had water throughout the office, not just in the kitchen, promoting healthy drinking. Just simple things like that. They had curved surfaces on their desks. They thought of the ergonomics of the workplace to prevent arthritis and joint pain. And this was the only office building that I visited where it actually was complete and well certified already, and I got to talk to the people in the office and kind of get a perspective of how they think well certification has affected their lives. And it was all positive. They all said to me that they felt a lot healthier since the change and since the interior had been changed of their offices. They said they thought this was because of the lighting and the reduction in CO2, and they just felt a lot more productive throughout their working day. So now my favourite building of all of them is the CIRS building. So this is the Centre of Interactive Research in British Columbia at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. This is a building made from concrete and sustainable timber. So there's something to note about the type of timber that was used for this building. There's a species of beetle called mountain pine beetle, and what it does is it burrows its way into a tree and then sucks all the moisture out of that tree. It's an invasive species that's causing havoc in Canada because when all the moisture has been sucked out the tree has become more susceptible to forest fires, and forest fires are on the rise across British Columbia. So one thing that is a sustainable solution to prevent these forest fires from happening is actually using this timber in construction. And luckily, the integrity of the timber isn't affected by this type of beetle. Okay, so when you first walk into the building, you're confronted by this large timber staircase and again, a large atrium. This atrium kind of creates social interaction between floors. You don't feel like you're closed off into different meeting rooms at university. There's big breakout spaces, so everyone's socializing and interacting. It also floods the building with light. And the lifts are hidden from view. They're still there for people that are disabled and for accessibility, but it does promote you taking the stairs if you can. I also like to think of this as a smart building. It's the first smart building that I've ever visited. It has 3,000 sensors, and these sensors measure temperature, motion, CO2, and there is a fourth one, but I can't remember it. And these sensors, depending on what they detect, are connected to different parts of the building. So, for example, if the building is too hot and the sensors detect that, the windows will automatically open and the heaters automatically turn off. So really clever things like that integrated throughout the building. It has a large green roof. Certainly not the prettiest green roof you'll ever see, but there's a reason for that. So these plants have been specifically chosen because they intake extremely large amounts of CO2 compared to the average plant. And again, this green roof is connected to those sensors I talked about before. So when the sensors go off for too much CO2 in the building, the MEP has a very advanced MEP solution where it basically sucks the air from this roof area and pumps it into the building and spreads it all out around the building. So you have like an O2-rich air within the building. Under these roof tiles, and also at ground floor level, there's 2 tanks which have a capacity of 83,000 litres, and that collects water to flush the toilets and for plant irrigation, because it also has this something called chocolate vine, which run up the side of the building. And this was a plant that was especially chosen because it is very leafy in the summer months, so shades the building from natural light, making the building more energy efficient. But in the winter, all of its leaves fall off, and it allows the sunlight into the building to heat up the building. So they've really thought of everything here in terms of sustainability. Okay, so to conclude, I think WELL certification is a really interesting topic, and one I've been trying to get out there, trying to teach more people about. It's definitely needed. It's been brought about by those chronic health problems I discussed earlier, and also advancing technology means that it's certainly capable within our buildings, building design. The only problem with WELL certification is it is expensive. It adds additional cost, especially if it's not done right. So one thing I learned from Scansgo and CBRE is if it is done right, if it's done with a multidisciplinary approach from the outlook, from the conception of design, then you can actually mitigate all costs associated with WELL certification, and it could become something that we do as commonly as BREEAM. So yeah, I'm trying to teach structural engineers about it because I met so many people, and most of them were sustainability consultants, trying to get the word out. So it's nice to share it with structural engineers. Also, environmental sustainability is incredibly important with things like climate change. However, this actually encompasses the 3 pillars of sustainability, which is economic, social, and environmental sustainability. And to create a truly sustainable building, you need to think about all 3. You need to think about economic, because the world's driven by money, so we need to think about these things. And I think WELL certification encompasses all 3, and yeah, is a fantastic thing to do. if you can, if you have the right client. Thank you.